Hello, hope everyone's having a good morning. I've just done the nursery drop off and I've just had a haircut, and here we are. And I thought I would film a different kind of video because I love chatting about the philosophy of mixing, and I thought it'd be good, instead of doing, you know, like a video of a breakdown of like a mix, to kind of actually talk about kind of the way that I process and what I've been trying to do lately to kind of better myself at mixing. There's a car just trying to reverse. He's very close to me. This is actually the first time I've done a video like this. It's quite interesting. I'm terrible at talking in front of people trying to reverse their car into me. You can see their headlights. And yeah, what I was saying was, I may have to edit this just because, you know, when you're in like a car park and people are looking at you to see if you're going or not, and I'm like, no, I want to stay in my place so I can film this video. I'm getting that vibes from people. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so I've done the nursery drop off this morning, had a haircut, and now I'm in the car and I'm about to head home. So I was doing a run a couple of days ago. When I mean run, probably more like a jog, but anyway, a bit of exercise to sit down all day. And I always think in my head when I'm going for a run, kind of, you know, about my work and what can I do to kind of improve, and, you know, just like think about, you know, is my process, am I doing things right? Because I think us as a mixer and, you know, as a community, you do look at other people and you kind of look at what they're doing and their tricks, and you know, you compare your mixes, I guess, to other people's mixes, and you know, you always want to try and do what's best and try and find like what's right. But one thing I was thinking about that I've been doing a lot lately, and I think it's worth saying because I think we get really hung up on it, but lately I've been really reducing the amount of plugins that I've been using on a mix and trying to basically get as much kind of out of one plugin before I add another plugin. And usually kind of my mixing style is I'll add a plugin. If I don't like what I'm hearing, I'll add another one, and I'll keep adding until, you know, that I hear that, you know, I'm hearing what I want to hear. And that's good, and I can see why people do that, and, you know, why I've done it and why I do still do it sometimes. But there's definitely something to be said about having an audio recorded and then keeping that kind of as natural as possible and as clean as possible before you start adding more processing, because I definitely think you can completely kill a mix by over processing, and I am guilty of that. And yeah, so I was on this run and I was thinking about kind of plugins, and, you know, there's so many good plugins out there now that it's so easy to just, you know, go and buy loads of plugins and experiment, and that is great. And I was watching this YouTube video, and it was one of my favorite mixers on there, Serbin. Now, he obviously doesn't do a lot of, you know, speaking in the sense of telling us what he does, but one thing he did say which really resonated with me is, you know, keep the processing as kind of minimal as possible to achieve the sound. So for example, in vocals, he would add like a compressor, then he would add a channel strip, and then if the channel strip isn't giving him what he wants, then he will add something. And that really resonated with me, because I do find that sometimes with vocals, for example, you know, I'll add like 7 or 8 plugins on, and really, if I was to mute kind of 4 or 5 of them and just kind of really understand what I'm doing with the first 3, then maybe I don't need to add the other plugins. And I think overall you're going to get a cleaner signal, and I think that that's important for, you know, quality and stuff. So that's one thing that I've been trying to do lately in you know, my mixing process. I've really been trying to minimize the amount of plugins that I'm using and the amount of processing I'm using, and kind of just focus more on the basics, the fundamentals, panning, balance, and just basically keeping it simple. And it's funny because when I chat to like other mixers, especially some people at the top of their game, like I interviewed Leslie Brathwaite last November now, nearly a year ago. Wow, it's gone quick. And he was on my podcast and we were chatting about mixing and stuff. And again, more things that really resonate with me is, you know, he was saying that he likes to keep things simple. He doesn't like to have an overcomplicated life, and he puts that into his mixing. So the way he likes to live his life is the way he likes to mix. And, you know, we were chatting and you know, it was a really eye-opener kind of listening to his approach on how he mixes and how things sound so good and so big, but he's doing very minimal processing. And so, you know, when I listen to these top mixing engineers, and then I look at myself and kind of what I'm doing, because, you know, I'm inspired by those guys, and I look up to them, and, you know, if my mixes can sound like them, then, you know, I'm a happy man, you know. And yeah, it was just one of those things, like food for thought, where I was like, yeah, maybe I am processing too much. Maybe I am doing too many things. Maybe I am overcomplicating. And Leslie always said, he said, to get a good mix, go back to basics, go back to the fundamentals of mixing. And, let's be honest, 90% of mixing is balancing the audio correctly. If you balance the audio correctly, you pan things nicely and you make nice room for everything, that is what mixing is. And I think sometimes as mixers, we can sometimes forget that. We get too hung up on, what reverb am I using today, or what, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But I'm not talking for everyone, I'm talking for myself here, and kind of what I've been kind of going through in my mixing process. But I think it's definitely worth kind of talking about, how we're trying to improve on what we're doing, because it's very easy to add plugin after plugin, but I think that it can ruin a mix. And I know I said that a second ago, so I probably repeated myself, but it definitely is true. And it's funny, I was mixing a track for Olivia, and one of her originals, and I had my mix bus, and then I had another mix bus on top, and in the end of this mix I was doing 2 mix bus processes because I ran out of inserts, and I was like to myself, this is too much. I mean, in the end I felt like it worked for the mix. So there are occasions where, it sounds a little bit contradicting what I'm saying and what I'm doing, but there are definitely occasions where you may have to process a lot more than usual. So I'm not sitting here saying, process less, it's always the best way. There's definitely an argument for having to process more if the recorded material isn't as, clean as you wanted it, or you're trying to achieve a certain sound in sound design. But if we're just talking like the basics of mixing, I look at that kind of Pro Tools session that I mixed and I've gone, wow, that's a lot of processing. And if you're anything like me, you're absolutely obsessed with how things sound and you have a passion for it, you probably go and mix with the masters, pure mix, all of those ones, and you watch like the pros that are doing crazy stuff, and you look at what they're doing. And I've had some people say, oh yeah, they're doing very little processing because they have good recorded stuff, but I don't see it like that, because I think it's more of a challenge when you get poorly recorded stuff to mix sometimes, and it's also more of a challenge when you get really high end stuff, because then you've got to try and make it sound good when it already sounded good. So there's definitely an argument for both, but I feel like there's a lot of tracks that come in that are like the middle ground, where it's like, it's very easy to do too much processing and it's very easy to do too little processing, so you've got to get the balance. And I definitely think finding the balance is the skill in mixing. People don't pay you for a mix for how much time you spend on a mix. They pay you for your knowledge to know what not to do with it. And that is true. And I've heard other people say that before. And I've definitely found that in, the last recent kind of 10 mixes, I'm looking going, okay, I'm liking the way this sounds. I'm processing less. And so, yeah, that's just some thoughts that I had in my head when I was on this run. And I was thinking, it'd be good to tell you guys and, just be honest about that. We're always trying to improve, I guess, and we're always trying to, better ourselves. And, I've heard before people say you're only as good as your last mix, and I guess that is true. So, but, and another thing as well, there's, especially in 2024, there is so many plugin companies and there is so many kind of options, and that definitely doesn't help. It's a good thing that we're spoiled for choice. It's good that we've got so many options, and that the accessibility of being able to mix on a laptop with headphones on, etc., is great. But I definitely think that it's very easy to go wrong with that. So yeah, give it a go. Try processing less. I know I've probably just waffled on there about processing, but first time doing a video in a car and just talking straight and not editing stuff. Well, hopefully not too much editing, but yeah. Try it on your next mix. Try and make a goal of using less. And it's actually funny, I was mixing a track yesterday and I thought to myself, normally I'd go for a channel strip, then a compressor, then another EQ, maybe a de-esser, maybe a couple of de-essers. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to use one de-esser, one channel strip. There's a compressor in the channel strip. Do I really need to add another compressor? This is what I was thinking in my head. I'm just telling you what I was thinking. And then I was like to myself, yeah, but if I add this like Fairchild compressor, it has a different sound to an 1176, so might as well add it. And then I thought, no, doesn't need it. It does listen to what you've been given. Does this vocal even need compression? And then I was like, actually, the vocal was already compressed. So guess what? I didn't even compress the vocal. Normally I'd go for, because we have this kind of muscle memory. It's like what we're used to. You get a vocal and you suddenly go for a compressor. And I think sometimes you got to think to yourself, don't just go for what you're comfortable with. Like, don't just go for a compressor because that's what you always do. Listen to the source that you have and ask yourself, does it need a compressor? If it does, then go for one. Maybe check if you've got a compressor in your channel strip and use that instead of adding another plugin. Or does it not need a compressor, and kind of be bold and just don't add it. So yeah, that's what I was doing in yesterday's mix, and I was listening to this morning back to it, and I was like, this is sounding big. This has a lot of room. This, I can feel every instrument. I can feel the layers. And I think that kind of answers the question that the more you process, you can go into danger of collapsing a mix and making the mix sound smaller. There's always going to be an argument that maybe it doesn't, but I'm just going off my opinion and what I've noticed from mixing. And yeah, I was listening to this track and I was like, yeah, it sounds big, and when you get a track and you're like, I'm actually really happy with this mix, it feels good, you feel like you've done something right. And yeah, I definitely felt like that this morning when I was listening to it. And that's kind of partly why I wanted to make this video, because I was kind of shocked at how little processing I did to achieve that sound. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to continue to do. So yeah, let me know what you guys do. Let me know your processing in the comments. Let me know, do you feel like you're over processing? If you are, maybe try and back it off a little. If you feel like you're under processing, maybe, add some more processing. I know it sounds very contradicting, this whole conversation, but mixing is a little bit contradicting. There's rules to break and there's things to do. But I definitely think mixing is all about feel. You have to go with what feels right. But most importantly, it's what source you're given. Listen to the source and think, do I need to use it or do I not? And then go from there. So yeah, that's my words of wisdom today. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you like this kind of video style where I'm just kind of talking directly into the camera. Yeah, hope you all have a lovely day and have fun mixing.